showing out, making moves, no doubt. FFA pride, it's what we're all about. From classroom dreams to real world flair, we got the stories you won't find anywhere. Beyond the jacket where the stories unfold, voices of the future, fearless and bold. Tune in now, let the passion ignite. It's more than a jacket, it's a way of life. Beyond the jacket where passion meets purpose.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Jacket podcast. We're so excited that you're here listening with us once again this Friday. We have a super exciting guest with amazing SAEs and an incredible story in his blue jacket. Heath, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yes, of course. So my name is Heath Laubach. I'm a recently retired state FFA officer. I was the Northwest Area Vice President in Oklahoma. Just finished that up in May. I'm going to be a sophomore at Oklahoma State University. Go Cowboys. Had to throw that in there. And studying Agribusiness Pre-Law. My FFA background is kind of unique. So my grandfather was an ag teacher. My dad is an ag teacher on his 38th year. And so it's kind of always that thing my family did. And growing up on a cow-calf operation and also having wheat, though I don't tend to handle that side of the business, I definitely learned what agriculture meant. I learned not just the joys and the struggles, but also the in-between moments, the moments that really define you. And so I think that's helped shape who I am and where I've gotten to today. Currently, I'm interning for the United States Department of Agriculture. I've gotten to do a lot of neat things with that, and that kind of ties back into those connections you build within the FFA. So in Oklahoma, I was elected my senior year, and I served my freshman year of college, which was a unique experience on its own, not taking a gap year, but powering through it. And it definitely made for a really amazing and impactful experience.
Well, that's a lot to swallow, Heath, and I think your episode, we can go into all of those fun things. What was it like growing up in an agriculture education family?
So it was really unique. For one, I like to say I really didn't know who my dad was until my 8th grade year. And honestly, he was constantly with his FFA students. I mean, any ag teacher anybody's ever had, we all know how dedicated they are to what they do. And on the flip side of that, because they're so dedicated, their families have to be dedicated as well. And so growing up, I like to say I was more comfortable with high schoolers than with my classmates. And it just boiled down to whether we were going to a stock show at age 5, or if I was judging the Green Hand Quiz contest or a speech contest at age 8. I just was able to learn a lot about the FFA growing up. And as I talked about, having that father-grandfather tie-in, it really made the FFA more like a family to me early on. And that's such an impact of the organization, is that 5 years, 6 years, FFA members will call it a family. But truthfully, I mean, generations of FFA members went through my dad's classroom, and they were all like cousins and brothers and sisters. And so it really made for a unique experience.
Oh, I love that. I think that's something that a lot of students, if your parent, mom, dad is an ag teacher, that you kind of have an entire family of just your chapter in addition to your state and national organization. What are some of your favorite earliest memories in FFA? Because technically you were a member before you were allowed to be a member.
Oh, yeah. So a little background on who I was. If I did good in my classes every year, and then if I had good attendance and was just a generally good person in school, I would get to go to our state FFA convention. That was kind of my parents' reward, if you will. And so every May, because it was always in April, late April, early May, we would board the bus. And so ever since I was little, I can remember going to convention. And it was so incredible because I served for the 100th Oklahoma State FFA convention.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes. And so it was so impactful to be able to have that full circle moment, because I can remember walking down the hallways and it's 9 o'clock at night and there's FFA members on the floor charging their phones. Of course, back then we didn't have the fancy phones. We had the little flip phones, or the stubby phones, as I call them. And so just having those memories, whether it was that or my cousins, they did the FFA course in Oklahoma. And so we would take them down early. And every single Sunday, the chorus would gather around this big rotunda of a hotel. And they would just sing these incredible songs. And the amount of talent that was there, I mean, it just sticks with you for so long. And so I'd have to say, just having that reward at the end of my year always made sure that I pushed through on my classes.
Oh, I can agree with that. No, I wasn't an ag teacher's kid, but Florida FFA State Convention was the highlight of my year for many years through middle school and high school. It was kind of my Super Bowl. I got to see all my friends from all over the state that I might not have got to see all year, and reconnect, and of course sing the songs with your friends, play cards in the hallway.
Exactly.
All the little things that are lost moments are technically things that you might not be there for, but they add to the memories. What inspired you through your years in FFA that made you really spark your interest in running for state office?
In Oklahoma, we're really unique. It's always kind of a repetitive process. You run your senior year, you serve your freshman year of college, and then the state president's always a college sophomore. And so I think it created a very unique experience in our state, because as an eighth grader, when you're coming into ag in Oklahoma, it really is like that mentor you look up to. They're not just somebody who is 1 year older, 2 years older, 3 years older. They are what you like to call it. Well, I like to call it that incredible role model. And the other unique thing about Oklahoma, we don't have area offices or district offices or regional offices. It's either local chapter office or the 8-person state officer team. And so it really makes the state officers look like that incredible figure and leader. And so watching that over the years, whether it was when I was younger, going to state convention, or even during my time in the blue corduroy jacket, I always knew the state officers were role models that made that impact on so many members, because they made the impact on myself. And I knew as I got older that was something I felt I could do, and something I think I could have left for the FFA members. And so that's why I chose to run, is because I knew the level of expectation needed, and I felt I could match that and even raise the bar.
Oh, I love that. I resonate with your message, Heath, and the fact that it is the pinnacle of leadership at that point in your FFA journey. The state officers are almost untouchable, while they are the same age as some individuals.
Yes.
And they're human just the same way those members are. They truly are inspiring individuals on stage. And I remember my 8th grade year was my first state convention, and watching the state officers on stage, I was like, that's what I want to do. They are the pinnacle of leadership and poise, and that's just who I want to be when I grow up. And I ran for it, and the people that I met along the way in that process were so impactful. Are there connections you made through your year that are still benefiting you today, maybe with your internship?
Yes, there so are. One of the very first people I've gotten to meet in the FFA in Oklahoma is our executive secretary. His name is Mr. Trevor Lucas. And that's kind of the person we handle with. We do have a state advisor, but he's more on the ag education side, ag teaching side. And then Mr. Lucas is our state officer parent, if you will. And it was so incredible because whenever I first met him, I didn't know we had a local tie. But his wife was actually the person that babysat me when I was younger. And so did not know that at all. And we were in 2 different towns on 2 different sides of the state. But it was so incredible how that little connection kind of sparked that. Well, I say all that because whenever I met Mr. Lucas, I was able to learn things about him and some of his friends and meet some of his connections. And through that, that's carried on to today, where I work with one of my coworkers who grew up with Mr. Lucas. And so it's kind of incredible how here we are 5 years later, and that connection's still rolling. And through this internship, I'm sure I've met more people that will continue deepening that connection. And so I think it kind of goes to show in the FFA, I mean, there's so many incredible people. You're looking at future musicians and business leaders, ag teachers, politicians. It's kind of the whole scheme and whole scope of things. And so it's really incredible how, you might have one connection one moment, but 2-3 years down the line, that's a partnership, that's an agreement, that's a coworker. And you never know that. I think that's what's so special about our organization is this, that little connection can go so far.
No, I totally agree. That's why the podcast exists. My SAE,
Right.
I met Farm for Profit and the guys that run that podcast. And from that little interaction with my SAE, it turns into a nationally recognized podcast to highlight FFA members who were just like me. And so
Right.
I think that's kind of a part of FFA that sometimes gets skipped over is the networking skills you gain to be able to have the eye contact and the handshake and carry on a conversation. But in the long run, continue to maintain those connections moving forward.
Yes, definitely.
CDEs and LDEs did you participate in, and was there one that was like your favorite?
So I'm going to start with the favorite one. And I would like to say public speaking, but I would be doing a disservice to my former teammate. He's now Oklahoma State FFA president. His name is Coy Davidson. He was actually the national public speaking champion a few years back. Yes. So I would like to claim that one, but I'm afraid I can't. I have to save that one for my friend. But in general, Oklahoma, we do so much. And so you kind of do everything you're expected to. One in particular that I would say kind of caught me off guard was the ag communication CD. I didn't do that until really my senior year. And it was kind of a funny story. At most AgCom contests in Oklahoma, you don't have to wear official dress. In fact, most don't. Because they're normally at interscholastics or, jackpot contests, if you know what that are. And so what we did was we knew that mentality, you dress for success. You dress how you want to win. And so my AgCom team, there was a gentleman and then two ladies. We always wore blazers, suits and ties. You could spot us from a mile away because it would be us in our blazer jackets and then the next group who would be in their flannels and their short shorts. And I really credit that to one of my ag teachers. Her name was Julie Foch, and she actually helped write a lot of the national AgCom curriculum. And the crazy thing about her is she didn't teach ag for 18 years. And then she finally got into that classroom. And she's really the one that sparked that interest. But besides AgCom, I did everything from meats judging, livestock judging, obviously public speaking. I did an event called the Food Science Technology CD, which was more just for the tastes and the aromas than it was for anything else. But like I said, we kind of do a little bit of everything in Oklahoma.
Well, there you go. I was the kid that did anything and everything. If the name sounded remotely interesting, I was going to try it. But I also agree this public speaking contest where you can dress to impress. I liked giving reasons. I liked to livestock judge.
Yeah.
I could dress to impress. And I think a lot of our listeners would resonate with that because the blue jacket is cool and all, but I don't know if it's the same up there in Oklahoma. When it's hot down here in Florida.
Oh, yes. It very much so is.
A shared agreement among all FFA members. When it's hot, and when it's cold, it's cold. It doesn't do much in between.
Nope.
Working with the USDA and FFA, how has your view of agriculture changed? I know mine definitely has from going from classroom to industry. I'm excited to hear your perspective on that.
It's really unique. So the USDA recently took over a board seat of the FFA from the Department of Education. And I think that's so impactful and incredible because that allows the industry to have a really direct voice on the organization. I think the FFA is so unique. It really is because it's like the pipeline for the next generation of ag leaders. And that isn't just in the leadership policy side, that's in a business side, as I talked about earlier. Whether you have an ag business or your own farm and ranch, it really, allows you to connect with those networking skills. from a USDA perspective and my own perspective, I really have developed a certain love for the organization because of who it produces. Obviously, it's not a secret that Secretary Rollins, Brooke Rollins, was a state officer. In fact, she was the first state officer to be Secretary of Agriculture for the United States. And when I tell you Brooke loves the FFA, she truly does love it. She has a little pillow. It's an FFA pillow, and it's in her office. And she talks about that every time. When you go in her office, she'll point that out. And whenever the national officers are at USDA, they always make sure, and she always makes sure that she sees them. And so the FFA really is that pipeline for that next generation. And I know for a fact the USDA believes in that. I believe in that. And you see that within the impact. You have this ag podcast and you're making that difference, not just to the FFA members who listen, but to the everyday average person who listens. We get to show off the organization. And there's so many incredible leaders that are currently in roles today, just like yourself, that they grew up in the organization, and they were able to learn how to public speak, learn how to talk to somebody, learn how to run a business. And you see that every single day within our ag industry, but also across the greater U.S.
As you've gone through your career in agriculture and you have grown up in a rural America to big city DC, what was that transition? I know that's not technically FFA based questions, but I have to know.
Oh no, I understand that. One of my favorite pastimes, and it was kind of the running joke on my state officer team, I was the scenic driver. If there was a 6-hour out of we called it side quest. That was my nickname, is side quest, is because I'd always take some random path. And so coming to DC, you don't really drive a whole lot. It's mainly metro. And so I was a bit nervous there coming over here because I didn't know how my side quest would venture off with the metro. But it really is so unique and impactful because I don't know if you've known this, but we recently finished the Great American State Fair. And every morning of the state fair, all 14 days, we had a livestock show. And then every night we had the rodeo 250. And that was really incredible because we had actual animals on the National Mall around the museums. And we were able to show the everyday Washington, D.C. citizen what it's like a little bit, just a tiny bit in rural America. And it was always funny because they would complain about, oh, it's too hot or I need some water. And we're like, and that's why we care so much about the animals, because they need twice as much, sometimes 4 times as much as we do. And so, that transition really is a challenge at first because you go to the big city. I grew up in a town of 13,000. I'm currently in a city with over 1 million. And so that transition is a bit challenging at first. But then whenever you realize you're kind of a spokesperson for rural America, it makes it so incredible because not only do you get to show your values as a person, but you also get to show the everyday person here in DC what it's kind of like to live back for me in Oklahoma, but just in general in real life.
Absolutely. When I went to WLC, the Washington Leadership Conference, I believe I was in between my freshman and sophomore year, which was actually unheard of.
Yes.
A lot of individuals there, but I really enjoyed it. I actually went on Oklahoma Week and made a lot of friends. And dreamed of becoming a cowboy. So I have a lot of love for Oklahoma City. I decided to wait till the end to say that. But riding the metro was super eye-opening. While I am from Florida, I have Disney World and lots of people. I also grew up on a cow-calf operation. And so that kind of being able to go from green grass and cows to skyscrapers was eye-opening for me. Granted, I've never lived there, so I can't necessarily relate to you on that level. Is there a favorite memory in your Blue Jacket that will carry on with you for a lifetime?
There really is. And it actually happened my freshman year. So a little bit about me. I was actually, my freshman year, I had a major surgery, which rebuilt part of my leg. And so ever since then, I've had a short leg on my left side. And the challenge that made was a mental mindset, because here I just got off my freshman year. I did really good in speeches, had success in other CDEs and LDEs, was successful in showing. And I didn't want people to perceive me as weak, because at the time I was in a wheelchair. And I would eventually have to go through 10 months of physical therapy and would learn how to walk again. But again, like I said at that time, it was that mental mindset. And so this is something I've carried with me for a long time. But my favorite memory is actually a moment in my blue jacket when I was in that wheelchair and I was talking to one of my friends at the time. His name was Corbin. And he sat there and he asked me, why aren't you going out with your friends who are in the middle of the group? You know, they're circled up. It's the FFA dance party. And I said, because I don't want them to see me in this chair as being weak. I don't want them to view me as something less than I am. And that was really impactful and stuck with me for a long time, because in that moment, Corbin said, you're only defined by your obstacle if you let it overcome yourself. And sitting there, knock on wood, sitting there, I thought about that for a minute. And it really reminded me that no matter what obstacles we face in our life, if we choose to use it as a crutch, we choose to let it be towering above us, we'll never overcome it. And with that being said, it's always going to define who we are. But if we choose to, work harder and push through it, and though it might involve pain, and though it might involve, stagnation and there's no progression, if we continue to fight for it, then we not only overcome that obstacle, but we define who our character is. And so that was just one of the most impactful moments in the FFA for me and my blue jacket. And though I've had a lot of fun moments, my favorite moment is that moment, because I felt it defined who I was going forward. I think it's what led me to state office and what led me to, having my internship here in Washington, D.C.
Heath, I think that is the best advice one of our guests has given us so far. I get a lot of jump in feet first and don't look back, or don't give up when it gets hard. And while all of that does apply to your situation, not being defined by your circumstances is huge. Everybody has
Yes.
something small or something big they're going through that they're scared to come out in the light. But the truth is when people see you, whether it is a temporary challenge or a permanent challenge, you'll find your people and your supporters, and you will define your character and who you are. And I think that's such a valuable piece of advice. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Of
Thank you for
course.
coming on the podcast today. Listeners, I hope you resonate with this message as much as I have today. Thank you for listening us again this Friday, and we look forward to seeing you next week.